There's also some things out there talking about pineal gland. That's the gland that we talked about that makes melatonin. You could get calcification, and some of the calcification could be connected to fluoride. And so, may want to think about getting a high quality water filtration system, at least an under counter RO system, reverse osmosis that filters out a lot of the fluoride, just because that's something that's going to be essentially it's a prescription drug in the water and you're getting it at uncontrollable amount. So it's really good to have a good water filtration system. So I have a whole house carbon based system as well as a under the counter reverse osmosis system. So I highly recommend having both, but at least have one for your drinking water. That way you can get a lot of the crap out of the water. So we'll put a couple of links of water filtration products that we personally use and recommend ourselves for with our family as well as patients. And so that will help at least improve the water quality because that could have a connection with pineal gland calcification.
Yeah, I got into fluoride years ago, just fluoride research and the toxicity of it, and how even places, most major cities, they add fluoride to the water. So you'll have, like in Kentucky, relatively decent water, but then at the end they add fluoride to it, which is just really criminal based on all the research we know about fluoride lowering the IQ and things like that. And so. When I was working out of a brick and mortar at a chiropractor's office, we actually had a few x-rays where people had neck injuries from car wrecks. And this might sound crazy, but we were able to actually see the calcification on the x-ray. If we were doing like a more of a head type x-ray for some of these neck and head injuries, you could literally see almost like this little darker spot, or it might have been bright white, I can't remember, depending on the x-ray machine, but you could see it. And I was asking the chiropractor, like, what is that? And he's like, well, that's the pineal gland. He's like, maybe this calcification thing is real, because you'll read that online and some people just label it a conspiracy, but I think there's totally something to it, and I have seen images of that.
Well, there's one study right here I'm looking at right now. It's a 2018 study, and they're looking at fluoride exposure and sleep patterns among adults. And they're talking about essentially, looking at that level. And they're looking at fluoride exposure affecting sleep patterns. I'll put the study here in the links.
Yeah.
But one of the conclusions here reached at the very end, let me kind of scroll down to it, said chronic low-level fluoride exposure may contribute to changes in sleep cycle and regulation and sleep behavior among older adolescents. U.S. additional prescriptive studies are warranted to examine the effects of fluoride on sleep patterns and determine the critical window of vulnerability for patients. And so essentially they're saying chronic low-level exposure, right? What about higher level exposure, right? What about the extra fluoride in your toothpaste too, right? So these are all some extra things that, it's just something you want to make sure that you have clean water. And one benefit of clean water is keeping the fluoride out, which could affect your sleep. Also, other stuff in the water, such as potential parasites and bacteria that may not get hit by your typical chlorine, and as well as potential pharmaceutical drugs. So, good, healthy filtration is going to be wonderful. We'll put the recommended links for the products that we use down below.
Speaking of drugs, why don't we mention drugs? People that are doing different pharmaceuticals for fatigue or for mood issues or for ADD or ADHD. I mean, people that are doing stimulants, methamphetamine derivatives. A lot of these people, depending on the half life, depending on the metabolism of the drug, depending on people's digestion, depending on maybe mixing that with caffeine or other stimulants. I mean, that's a huge problem. I mean, we are an addicted society to stimulants. I mean, caffeine is probably the number one stimulant used worldwide, but certainly I have tons of clients, even teenagers, unfortunately, 14, 15, 16-year-olds that are taking pharmaceuticals like Vyvanse or other really, really stimulating things to supposedly help them focus better. But then they can't sleep at night. So then they're on social media at night. They're looking at their blue light screen, which is going to be suppressing melatonin production all night. Now they're laying in bed, scrolling on TikTok while they're supposed to be sleeping. And so there's no wonder we have so many teenagers that have depression and anxiety issues too, because, good sleep is really important for a good mood. And I tell you, if I don't sleep as well, mood's not as good. And that's just common sense, because the glymphatic system, G like Gary, the glymphatic system works when you're sleeping. And this is almost like think of it like a brain detox. And with not enough sleep or quality sleep, that system doesn't work. And then our brain, we just can't think clearly. We make worse decisions. We have less ability to react, like in terms of driving and reaction time and speed. I mean, the brain really takes a hit when we don't have sleep, good quality sleep.
100%.